It's one of our hardiest fruits in this neck of the woods, so apples are always a good pick in the garden. But are you planting the right variety? We have a list of best choices and instructions on the care of our favorite fruit straight ahead on this edition of Great Gardening.
We celebrate each year as we receive it.
For good nutrition, we need a balance of colors.
I like to can because I'm a gardener.
We brought home an orchard for our community.
This was just an overgrown area full of bramble.
Hello and welcome to Great Gardening. I'm Pamela Fish with this final regular season edition of our program. Garden expert Tom Casper, the president of the Duluth Garden Flower Society, is here, as is St. Louis County educator and horticulturist Bob Olin. Well, gosh, where did the season go?
It's a quick spring, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
We were anticipating it for so long, and now it's into summer already.
Well, yeah, the beginnings of summer.
The beginnings of
Although
summer.
today feels like spring.
And things are growing and people are out in the gardens. So we hope they have a lot of questions for us.
Just a great spring. We've been waiting a long time for a good one like this.
That's
and we're
right.
on our way, just really beginning on a good growing season.
Right. Well, our phone volunteers from the Carleton County Master Gardeners Program are here to answer your calls and questions. We thank them for their time. Please give them a call with your gardening questions, which we'll get to our experts. And you can call 218-788-2844, or there's a toll-free number you can call, 877-307-8762. You can also email your questions during this half hour to askgardening@wdsc.org. A lot of information on apples and apple trees coming up, but each week it seems as hard as we try. We can't get through every one of our questions, so we have a few left over. We're going to start with that.
Let's eat.
Okay. Here's one from Judy in Hibbing that says, can I put tires around my tomatoes to keep them warm?
Sure can. I don't think there'd be anything really wrong with that.
Okay.
Again, it goes back to let's get the good varieties in there, but there's going to be a little bit of solar gain. Tomatoes don't really respond to soil increases in soil temperature quite as readily as peppers and a few other crops do, but nonetheless, yeah, it makes a pretty good container for that purpose.
Okay.
And certainly will last a long time.
Right.
Longer than you want.
Right.
maybe.
Longer than you want.
Probably forever. Ruth says, my spirea is not leafing out. Will it recover from this harsh winter?
Well, I think it depends, but a lot of them did die back this past winter, and what Ruth should do is really cut off anything now that hasn't leafed out, or more than likely cut off everything now that hasn't, and see if it comes from the ground. More than likely it survived at ground level and it's going to resprout. It's going to take some time to recover though from this really harsh winter. So.
Okay. All right. So I have a follow-up question because mine didn't do too well. So we pruned them back, pretty early on. Now the new growth is coming. So can we go in and prune the stuff that still looks dead?
Sure.
Prune again?
Yep.
That won't
yeah,
hurt anything?
clip those off. Yeah, you want to be careful because of course those newly emerging shoots or that new growth is very tender and very easy to damage right now. But you can go in and just gently snip out the stems that didn't survive. So.
All right. Good to know. Okay, Ellen has blue fescue grass, but the color's fading and she's wondering if she could feed it something to get the blue back into it.
Well, it'd be a nice thought, but probably not. That bluish hue is really the real young tissue that's emerging, and actually it'll have more of a green appearance as it begins to mature. But there's nothing wrong with green for grass, is
Right.
That's right.
The winter we've had, we want green.
That's true. That's true. Katie has a bush carragano. How far can you cut it?
Well, you can really take those right down to the ground. That's also called Siberian pea shrub.
Okay.
Very excellent hedge and privacy barrier, very hardy. I think it's a zone 2 plant. So it's really one of those very hardy plants that we can use. Works great for a hedge or an area to divide or a screen, things like that. Take it right down to the ground and come back fast and furious.
Does it flower?
It has little kind of nondescript little yellow flowers, and then it have a little pod kind of where it got its name pea shrub from.
Okay.
Has a little pod that's maybe about an inch long, and it does have some barbs on it, so it is a little bit precarious also. So
Okay. Ernie from Brookston wants to know, What fertilizer should I use for newly seeded grass? And then another question in conjunction with that, can I use oats as a cover crop over newly seeded area instead of hay?
Well, a couple of questions there. First off, no synthetic or chemical fertilizer on those emerging seedlings. They are all salts, and we want to just leave them alone until we've mowed them maybe twice, then we can use a little fertility. Prior to seeding, then you might want to come in with something like a good organic fertilizer, maybe a combination of compost or well-rotted manure worked into the soil pre-plant. But once we've got them seeded, then we want to stay away from all synthetic fertilizers there. As far as covering material, we're just trying to retain moisture. You can do this a couple different ways. If you're willing to get out there with a hose, with a shower attachment and just water it down or sprinkle daily, that'll do the same thing. Most people can't do that. So consequently, we like to use hay. He could use an oat straw if he wanted as well. That would serve the same function. You just don't want to bring in a lot of seed that might be almost a weed within your initial grass seeding area.
Okay, great. Well, it was a tough winter on many of our trees, including some apple varieties. Let's take a look now. Here's one that you provided for us, Bob, which did show some damage.
Yeah, this is our favorite Honeycrisp, and Honeycrisp, when it was introduced, was never introduced really as a Zone 3 tree, and you can see some of the damage here. It didn't kill the tree. It's leafed out, partially leafed out, but it's lost an awful lot of its vigor. And this is planted in Zone 3, and kind of an indication that you want a good protected site if you're going to plant Honeycrisp in the colder regions in our area.
And then this one is an example of a better result.
Well, you're beginning to see we should have large leaves like we see in the foreground here, but you can notice the immature leaves. We're seeing a lot of this on apples this year, where we've got very small leaves, and this doesn't necessarily mean that the long-term health or survivability of the tree is being impacted, but we really need a good growing season. It's these leaves that are going to be recharging the root and bringing the vigor back into the plant, so you want to do everything you can. We've had good moisture now in July, or in June and May, and into July when it gets a little drier. I'd want to be watering a little bit at that time as well.
Okay, sounds good. Now, on to an inner city space in Duluth that has been transformed into gardens for the good of the entire community.
Hello, I'm Kristen Stutchess, and we're at the Hillside Public Orchard. Well, it started out a little over 3 years ago, and I live right across the street, and I would look out and notice this half acre, and it was just grass, and eventually connected with UDAC, who owns the land, and got the approval and started walking in the neighborhood, asking people if they'd be interested in sponsoring a tree. And now a lot of different people have ownership in different aspects. First stage was 20 fruit trees, so apples, plums, pears, cherries. And then the second stage, if that were successful, the second stage was a native butterfly attracting bed. And then the third stage was 2 accessible raised beds so that people of all ages and abilities could come and garden. Traffic and no trees, that's what this area of the central hillside has a lot of. And there's studies that show that there's more crime when there's fewer trees and when there's traffic and things like that. So we're trying to buffer that and create an oasis for the people in this area and beyond. Especially this third year, we've noticed a lot more people coming on their own, which is what we'd hoped for, that this would be a food forest in time. Maybe you'll see that someday. And that people would just come like they do to the woods and harvest blueberries that we saw, strawberries, and on their own time. And then we have nasturtiums, which are edible, and kids especially love eating the petals. And also you can eat the leaves. And they're so fun in salads. They're kind of got a peppery taste. This one is our later season bed, and it's more of an Italian bed. So we have tomatoes. We usually plant cherry tomatoes because since this is a public space, our hope was that people would have a picnic and then get fresh vegetables right here. We want the feeling that there's an abundance. If there's ever too much, the chickens beyond are very happy. Each month that you come to visit the orchard, there's something to harvest. So a few weeks ago there were cherries, all sorts of cherries. Right now there's Juneberries and beginnings of blueberries, there's currants. We planted our first year sunflowers, and then we had hundreds of volunteers that the squirrels and the birds helped distribute. This orchard is feeding not only the neighbors and community at large, but also lots of butterflies and bees and hummingbirds, so it's bringing in a lot of life. Right now we've got black-eyed Susans, and we also have green-headed coneflower in the back, really tall. We have elderberry, which is white flowers blooming, that big bush. The bonds that we create to make this garden are priceless. And so no matter what, we're gonna win.
All right, well, just a great project out there at the Hillside.
Kristen is such an asset to the community and to that neighborhood, and the effort that she and those neighbors are putting into transforming their community.
That's right. Yeah. You can go online to find out about their work days and other things about the Hillside Gardens. I believe we have a link too from our website. Well, if you'd like to plant your own orchard, or maybe just a tree or two, we have a list for you that might be good to start with. And Bob, these are some of your favorites.
Yeah, of course, I'm a little biased, but these are apples, that left-hand list. These are the hardiest. These are going to grow everywhere. If we can still find zone 2s anywhere in this area, they will definitely grow there. Chestnut crab, don't slight this one in any way, because that's a wonderful crab apple, very, very hardy. The hardiest trees are really crab apples. We didn't have a domesticated apple in Minnesota until we brought in some from the East Coast and then started grafting them onto some of these real hardy crab apple rootstocks. Frostbite goes back a long, long ways. This was just recently introduced. This is in the parentage line for many of the University of Minnesota introductions, including Keepsake and Honeycrisp. It brings in the real sweet taste. Keepsake goes back a ways. Prairie Magic, Saskatchewan introduction. Red Baron, the University of Minnesota State Fair, Sweet 16. Wealthy was the original apple. It was brought in the 1860s from Maine, because at that time we really didn't have any good eating apples that were hardy in the state of Minnesota. Then the second list, these are hardy, but as we found, we got to be a little careful. They were never really promoted. Honeycrisp was promoted and freezer tested at Zone 4 along the lake, region at 3B, and Zestar also at 3B. They are hardy, but if you've got a difficult site or you're extremely far north, you might plant that along with one or two other varieties from the list on the left.
Okay, well, great. And you'll be able to find that list on our website as well. But it's really, really good information. And guess what? We're getting questions about apple trees. From Karen, she says, how do you stake a newly planted dwarf apple tree, and how long do you stake and wrap them?
You know, it's really a good question. She's got a dwarf, and they don't really need to be staked like the larger ones because there isn't the leverage. We usually like to stake trees in the fall of the year because they don't have enough time really to get that root system established. So anything you're planting right now, you really shouldn't have to stake. If you are going to stake, we only leave the staking on or the guy wires on for one season, and then we take them off, because as a tree naturally sways in the wind, it develops strength in that center stem or trunk. The other thing, be very careful. You want a band of material around there that you're going to stake. You don't want any of the guide wires to actually cut into the tissue, which can actually damage the tree. So a couple things. This year, a dwarf tree, early in the year, no need to stake at all.
And the second part of her question was wrapping the tree. In the fall, she'll want to do that, or any of our young, immature trees that people are planting, wrap at least for the next 5 to 10 years, really to protect. Seeing a lot of damage from voles, deer, rabbits, mice, things like that do a lot of damage to our trees in the wintertime. So wrapping them at least for the next 10 years. So.
Okay. David from Saginaw has a question for Tom. He wants to know if you can divide a large peony into 4 clumps now.
David, you can do anything you want. And actually, you can divide it. It's not the ideal time. You're probably going to impact or interrupt the blooming this year, but he can divide it right now, best from about August 15th to September 15th.
Sure. David also has an apple question about Sweet 16 and delicious apple trees with dead branches. Can those be trimmed back now? And also, can I cover up a wound on those trees?
The dead branches, I guess you really could take off at this particular time. We just don't want to do any more pruning of the actual living tissue at this point. And once again, Honeycrisp and delicious, which you wouldn't expect to be that hardy, and there's more evidence of some of the winter injury that occurred there. Need another part to his question, did he?
About covering a wound.
Okay, covering up wounds. There we usually just want to, you want to leave it open, we want to leave it exposed, maybe take a box cutter or a sharp razor knife and clean up the wound so that it doesn't trap any water, and then we really don't advise use of any other type of protective material.
Okay. Andrea from Saginaw has ferns with green tops and bottoms, but the middle of the stalk is brown, and wondering what's going on there.
It could be a little bit of a weather issue more than likely, because if it could be some kind of damage, but really without seeing it, it's hard to say what would cause that. I mean, there's very few problems with ferns. Most of them are hardy for our region, but it could be a little bit of the type of spring we've had. So.
Okay. A viewer from Proctor has asparagus, had their first meal. It has now gone to fern. Do you cut that off?
I'd let it go. As a matter of fact, we want to advise people that you don't want to cut anything after about the 4th of July or so. Now we want to recharge the roots, so let everything go at this point.
Is a prairie magic a good partner for a Honeycrisp tree?
There's a good question. They should work out well together. The bloom will be close, so I think that that would be a good pairing.
Okay.
Sweet 16 is another real good pairing. They bloom almost the identical time that Honeycrisp does.
Okay. And then Mary from Washburn has an allium that turned yellow within 2 weeks. Why might that have happened?
Again, that's probably a environmental kind of issue where they're starting to die down, but it is pretty early for that to happen. I would wait and see. She may be in too heavy a wet soil with the spring we've had, so not to worry at this point, but not real common for that to happen so quickly with allium. Usually those leaves stay green well into July. So
it could be, in view of the fact, Tom, that they're in the same family that garlic and onions. We do see some disease that creeps in, and occasionally that viral disease will actually break down some of the chlorophyll, because you're right, it's a little early to see that them break down. It should be good and hardy with the snow we had too, so it may be a viral issue that's going on here.
All right. More questions for later, but we want to let people know that there are good ways to protect your apples and your trees from bugs and blight during the growing season. And here's Christian again with one example.
So when I first started, I planted apple trees at my house, and I had some Honeycrisps, which we have in here, and they were the most delicious apples ever. And I thought, oh my gosh, why aren't we just putting apple trees everywhere? And the third year, the apple maggot came into the fruit and destroyed I had 30 beautiful apples, and they were not edible. So I thought, we had already started this orchard, and I thought, that's the opposite. I don't want people to take an apple and think it's disgusting. Right here, we don't have an apple, a real apple, but we have a trap. It's a tanglefoot sticky trap. So don't pick it. It is an organic control for the apple maggot. We want this whole thing to be organic, and I'm learning from Cindy Hale. She's at the University Research Farm, and Deb Schubat too, also from UMD, uses sticky traps. And some research says that on a mature tree, 3 is just as good as pesticides, and you can get them at Dan's Feed Bin and probably other places. We put a plastic baggie around the apples, so this way you can just throw away the plastic wrap. It can be saran wrap, it can be a baggie. We just tie it tight and put the sticky. I have a lot of kids help me with this, putting the sticky stuff on, and the apple maggots think it's fruit. It's just plastic, and you can actually use a solo cup, like those plastic cups. It just needs to be red. They're looking for red. In our plastic, we poke a hole so that the water drains, because you don't want it to be heavy, you don't want it to pull the branch down. So it's just got to be light and red and kind of the size of an apple. So we usually do it first or second week of June, and they go and fly in, and then they stick to it, and then they die. It preserves our apples, and then we can have safe apples to eat.
That is one way to do it. There are other things you can treat your apple trees with, or try to get rid of apple maggots with.
Yeah, if people have isolated plots, they may not be affected by apple maggot, may not know what it is. First off, the apples can still be used, and we jokingly say that applesauce cures a lot of apple
That's
problems.
right. We like
So
that
apple
applesauce.
pies and applesauce, the maggot actually is no longer in the apple, so you don't have that to worry about. You can actually bag some of the higher quality apples with a transparent bag, and that's been done for many, many years and done in this area successfully.
And there are sprays, I'm sure.
And there are some there. If you're going to get involved in a spray program, it's kind of a real commitment, and it is an awful lot of effort as well as some of the environmental consequences. So we'd rather have people consider some of these low toxic other options.
All right. A lot more questions, but we don't have a lot more time, so we're going to do a lightning round. Okay. All right. This question from Park Point. I have a dwarf burning bush on the south side of the house with some dead stock and some leafing out. Can I cut down the stalks, and how low can I go?
Right now and cut to new growth.
Okay. Another one for the winged,
Euonymus?
Euonymus, thank you very much. This one's 20 years old, also a burning bush. No life in it. Is it late in getting its growth, or is it done?
Yeah, probably really late.
Yeah.
More than likely
Maybe
dead.
the
May
late
not
burning
come.
bush?
Yeah,
All
cut
right.
it right down to the ground, see if it's going to come back. But more than
Okay.
likely, if it hasn't yet, it's not going to.
It was a tough winter, wasn't it?
It was
Yeah.
a tough winter.
Bill in Calumet wants to know how to take care of root maggots in my radishes.
Ooh, he's got radishes and root maggots in him. I don't have a quick, easy solution at this point. I would say replant. If he wants to do it non-chemically, he's going to have to come over the top with a real fine mesh, a product like Remay, and try to exclude the flies. You can also use, there are certain soil preps, certain insecticides that can be used, but at this point, it's kind of over the horse is out of the barn, so to speak,
Okay.
and he's not going to be able to control them.
Here's someone with a clematis that's 8 years old. Why is it not blooming?
More than likely, it's a fertility issue, or not enough sun, or too much mulch. So fertilize it now, make sure it's in a lot of sun, and pull the mulch a little bit away from the base of the plant.
Okay, John from Washburn, how late can carrot seed be planted and still have time to mature?
It all depends on the size of your carrots, and I would plant right now, and even until probably the end of June, you'll get smaller carrots, and actually they're considered to be gourmet in some areas, in some restaurants, and have higher value. So if they're not large, you're still going to get carrots, but probably the end of June would be the very latest.
All right. Leo has a rhododendron and wants to know when to trim the new growth near the bottom.
Well, really, the only time you want to prune a rhododendron, or what part of it you want to prune, is the new growth. So the flowers are just coming now and going to be wrapping up in the next week or so, and then the growth will come, and if he wants to do some pruning, then it's some selective pruning at that point, but not wholesale pruning.
A question from Grand Marais, winter scald on my Scotch pine, will it come back?
All depends. Again, you got to look for the growth out of the tips, and at this point we should see some candle elongation and so forth. There was a lot of damage to Scotch. We saw that, and you'll know by next spring whether or not it survived.
Okay, a couple more apple ones we want to get to. A Honeycrisp apple on standard stock, 7 years old, hasn't produced. Is it okay? Is it going to produce?
That's a very good question. First off, it's on standard stock. Gives you a bigger tree, but it's also a little bit hardier. And we've gone away from that, but that may be a solution. 7 years on standard is still young. Semi-dwarfs come in quite a bit earlier. Standards will take more time.
Okay, and an apple tree, I don't know what kind. Ron wants to know when to cut off the 2 leads. No, it has 2 leads. When to cut one of them off?
Ooh, should have been done before we broke bud. I wouldn't do any cutting right now because of some of the risks of disease, but very, very early next spring, April 1st, cut off the weakest of the 2 leaders.
All right. Well, we apologize for questions we didn't get to, but we sure got to a lot. You guys did a great job on that lightning round. Well, we go from Park Point to Hibbing to Ely with a great planning tip to boot. Here's this week's Grow and Show. These bright pink lilies are just one example of the success the McKays have with gardens on the bay side of Park Point. Tom says when they lost their dahlias to a wet spring, he spread a box of wildflower seeds in their place and was quite pleasantly surprised with the results. Lillian Stutzman of Hibbing shares this riot of color from last season's garden. Lillian is a loyal viewer and obviously a great gardener as well. Mary Hudson of Washburn found an even better use for her aluminum jello mold. It's a great fit as a patio planter on her back deck umbrella table. And Dan McCoy of Ely netted this photo of a bumblebee feeding on one of his zinnias. A great taste of summer. If you have pictures of blooms, bugs, or other garden fare to share, please send them to us at greatgardening@wdse.org or mail to the address on your screen and let us show what you grow. Please keep those pictures coming in. We won't be on the air again now till September, but we love to see them, and we also put them on our website in our garden gallery so people can enjoy them there as well. Also, new items on our events calendar, and you can find that list of apple varieties as well as a lot more information on our website. So keep an eye on that. Go to wdse.org/gardening.
And
And
if they really want to see us again, they can go to that website and watch these episodes
That's right.
over and over and over again.
that's what we do, right?
That's what we do.
All right. Well, again, this is our last regular season program, but we will be back with a season wrap-up on our Fall Harvest Show in September. So, to our accomplished experts, thank you so much for all your great advice and inspiration throughout the season, you guys. It has been really a good one.
Been great. We really want to thank Public Television for the wonderful
you.
service they provide, and certainly all of our viewers for all of their outstanding questions. Our apologies. We answered so many, but have a few we didn't quite get to.
A few that we don't get to, but you guys gave us a lot of good answers and information. We want to also thank our phone volunteers from the Carleton County Master Gardeners. Really appreciate your efforts, and those of all of our phone volunteers. And to all of you who called in questions. And from all of us here at Great Gardening, thanks for watching and enjoy the garden.